Okay, so we have a timeline here of events leading up to the American Revolution, and I put these in chronological order here. There's some that happened in the same year, so the order here doesn't matter as much. Although I did put the Grenville Program before the Sugar Act and the Currency Act, just because the Grenville Program includes those two things. So you'll notice here that I start off with the Proclamation of 1763, and the colonists' complaint here is that they want to move west. They want to move to land that's west of the Appalachian Mountains, and the land speculators. These are people that are wanting to buy vacant land that nobody's settled yet, so that way they can sell it to people who are settling later on and make some money. So a lot of these wealthy land speculators, including people like John and Abigail Adams, George Washington, others, they saw this as a good investment opportunity. So they were upset about the Proclamation of 1763 because they weren't able to access that land that they could make money on later. So we have the Grenville Program, which includes the Sugar Act and the Currency Act. These are all laws where Britain is trying to control the colonial economy more because they have that debt to pay off from the French and Indian War. So the Sugar Act makes it harder for the colonists to smuggle, although it affects mostly in New England. And the Currency Act kind of takes away printed colonial money. The feeling of revolution is actually fairly low for all these because none of these are really brand new. Smuggling was going on, and there was already kind of not a lot. The colonies were already restricted in their trade. Plus, this only affects a small part of the country. The Currency Act. Printed money was hard to come by in the colonies anyway. That's why they traded with tobacco and other things earlier on. So this doesn't represent a huge change. With the Mutiny Act, the Quartering Act, that's what it's better known as, where soldiers were allowed to stay in colonist houses, and they didn't have to get permission for that. That also was kind of a continuation of something that was happening already a little bit towards the French and Indian War. So these are relatively low. It's a little bit higher. I have it at 4 here and up to 5 here. So it's a little bit higher. It's a little bit more intense, but it's not anything super brand new. It's not till the Stamp Act where things really start to kind of go up. I have it as an 8 here, because this is a kind of the first direct tax on the colonies, and they feel like this tax is affecting them, and they didn't have a say in it. So this is where the kind of no taxation without representation begins to take effect. Okay, after that, with the Boston Massacre, where we have kind of our first violence, and that Britain was brutally treating the colonists. As we'll see later, there's kind of propaganda that comes up of showing the Boston Massacre and the British as really cruel and brutal to the colonists. It plays a big role in getting people really angry at the British. So it's up to a 9. We're up pretty high at this point. The regulator movement I kind of mentioned the other day, and this is kind of based on colonial taxes, but the problem is the king chose the officials that put the high taxes on. So there's kind of a anti British feeling there too, although it kind of lessened a little bit because that's not directly connected to the British government. The Tea Act, however, brings that pressure up again. And this is because it's not about taxes, the Tea Act. The Tea Act is not about taxes. What it's really about is giving preference to the East India Company, a British business, over the colonial merchants, because it gave a monopoly of the tea industry to the East India Company. The price of tea actually dropped, but the colonial merchants felt like it wasn't fair because they were kind of shut out of competition. So that makes them angry as well. And then lastly, also have the first Continental Congress down here at the bottom. And this Continental Congress is kind of like really kind of organizing resistance to the British in a way that's important, because it kind of lets Britain know that, hey, we are not happy about this, and we might do something about it later. So it's kind of getting ready for war. I should also mention back up here with the Stamp Act how important the boycotts were as a colonial action to let the British know that they were not happy about what was going on. So the boycotts here, the First Continental Congress here, the Boston Tea Party here, these are all actually colonial actions that kind of spurred people to get more enthusiastic about possibly revolting against the British. Most of these other ones are British actions, but for every action, there's an opposite reaction to it, right? So every time the British government did something to restrict the colonies took action in some way or another, by smuggling more, or by dumping tea in a Boston harbor, or issuing propaganda to kind of paint the British as evil, or kind of letting the British know that they're ready to go to war. All these things are colonist reactions to stuff the British have been doing. Okay, so that gets us close to the revolution, and we'll talk more later. Thank you.